Hi, ma'am.
Hi.
It's Onati speaking, ma'am. I'm using my sister's account right now.
Oh, okay. I was wondering.
Yes, I'm using Noni Khatib.
Yes, I can see, my dear.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. I have a question.
Yes, darling.
Is it possible if we can record this Zoom session because I have to?
Oh, leave. Okay. Yeah. So I tried recording yesterday. It didn't work. I'm going to try again today. If anyone else is recording, that would be great.
If anyone else
is recording, I think Lisa recorded yesterday. Hey.
Yes, I did, ma'am, but there was no audio.
Are you serious? Oh, hectic. Oh my gosh.
Okay. Yes, and someone else also recorded, and then there was no audio, and they didn't have headphones on.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so well, I think
ma'am, basically,
yes.
If you record, ma'am, you shouldn't have headphones or earplugs or earphones in because then it won't record the sound.
Oh, okay, cool. But it looks like it's recording from my side as well. So hopefully today it will register everything. Okay, cool.
Okay, so ma'am.
Yeah, Nati?
Once it's done, can you email it to me, please?
All right, I will. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am.
All righty, no problem.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like it's working today. Well, I hope it is. I can write on the screen. So if anyone is stuck in the waiting room or if they message you and tell you they want to come in and I'm not seeing them, just let me know and then I'll, yeah. Okay, kiddos, let's get started. Right, so today we're going to do these questions, right? And it's based on what might come in your test tomorrow, okay? So just give me a second. All right. So first question. Okay, so let's look at 4A here. This is also in your textbook. I'm just not sure what page, but it's, yeah, under functions 2. All right, so looking at the first question, right? They want us to determine the A, the K, and the Q, right? So looking at 4A, what type of a graph do you think this one is? Any ideas? Yeah, it's an exponential, perfect, right? So for 4A, this one is going to be an exponential, right? And this one is in the form y equals A multiplied by K to the power of X plus Q, like that. All right. So what we're gonna do is, you guys tell me, first things first, what should I do? What's the easiest one I can use here? Any ideas?
Q, ma'am.
Okay, so we want to find what A, K, and Q are. So first things first, let's sub in the easiest point. We're going to sub in 0, 1. Okay, this is my X, this is my Y, right? So where I see Y, I'm going to put in 1. A, I'm not going to put in anything. K, there's nothing. And where there is X, I'm putting in 0, like that. Okay? So at this point, you now have 1 equals A plus Q. Okay, so let's call this equation 1. Now, I'm going to take the other point. I'm going to sub in the point 2, 9. Okay, that's my X, right? And that is my Y. So here, right, where I see Y, I'm plugging in 9. Okay, A multiplied by K to the power of 2 plus Q. Okay, From the graph, just by looking at the graph, what do you think Q is? Or what other information can I use from the graph?
0, ma'am. It's
Right, so
0.
what's going to be 0?
Q, ma'am.
Perfect, okay? So the Q value is equal to 0 because that's where the asymptote is. Our asymptote is at the point y equals 0. So that's why Q is equal to 0 here. So in the first one, 1a plus 0. So therefore, we know that a is equal to 1. So we've solved that first one. So just by saying Q is equal to 0, you're going to get a mark for that. For doing this and getting equation 1, you get a mark there. And then for finding what a is, you also get a mark. So 3 marks so far. So since I now know that a is 1, 9 equals 1 multiplied by k squared plus, remember we said Q is 0. Okay, so now you're at the point 1 times k squared is just k squared. Okay, I can write the number 9 as a product of its prime factors, shift fact, and this becomes 3 squared is equal to k squared. Okay, so for this one, right, my k is equal to 3. Okay. So from your theory, I posted the theory for exponentials and all the other graphs on the announcement, okay? So we know that if you have an exponential, the k value can never be negative. K cannot be negative, okay? This is also part of your notes. So since we've done that, for this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 marks for that type of sum, okay? Any questions related to this first one?
Ma'am,
Yes, darling.
how did you get 0 for the asymptote?
Right. So when you look at this graph, right, they haven't written anything else, okay? So compare A and C, okay? So can you see for C, there's actually a dotted line showing that the asymptote is 1 or y equals 1. So for this one, for C, Q for this one is going to be 1. But since here they haven't actually shown it, right, it means that the asymptote is actually on the axis like that. So that's why we take y equals 0 and then the Q is equal to 0. Okay. So if
Thank you, ma'am.
all right, so if they haven't shown the asymptote like in C, Q is always going to be 0. Okay. All right. So that's 4A done. Okay. So maybe let's do 4C since it's also an exponential. Okay. So we're drawing on the same principles, right? So it's an exponential graph. Okay. So that means we're still working with y equals a multiplied by k to the power of x plus q. Now, again, just by looking at the graph, look at the asymptote. The asymptote here is y equals 1. That means the q value is going to be equal to 1. Okay, so q equals 1 here. All right. Now, next step, we're going to sub in. Let's use the easier point first. 0 and 2. So the x is 0, the y is 2. So 2 equals a multiplied by k to the power of 0 plus 1. Anything raised to the power of 0 becomes 1. So that's why we're left with a plus 1 equals 2. Last step, okay, isolate that. A is therefore equal to 1. Okay, so marks here, you're going to get a mark for Q being equal to 1. You're going to get a mark for subbing, and you're going to get the mark for A being equal to 1. All right. So now that we know that you have 1 times k to the power of x plus 1, I can plug it in like that. Now I can use the other point. I'm going to sub in the point -1 and 4. Okay. So where I have y, I'm going to put 4. 1 times k to the power of -1 plus 1. Okay, so here, this just becomes 1. 1 times k to the negative 1 is just k to the negative 1. What's another way I can write k to the negative 1?
Negative K, ma'am.
1 over k, ma'am.
Say that again.
1 over k.
Perfect. 1 over k, right? You had plus 1 here. Okay. If I take it over to the other side, it's going to become negative. So 4 minus 1. So 1 over k is equal to 3, right? Remember, from the other lessons, we said if you have something that looks like that, you can just switch the positions here, okay? So k is therefore equal to 1 over 3. Okay, so the k here is 1 over 3. So you get a mark for subbing. This one, you're going to get more marks because you have a k to the negative 1. Okay, so for this one, total is 6 marks. So your equation ends up as y equals 1 times a third to the power of x plus 1. You don't necessarily have to show the 1 here. Okay, so that's why we write it like that. Right, any questions? No, we're good? Okay, cool. Was there anyone who wasn't here yesterday?
Me, ma'am.
Okay,
Me,
so,
ma'am.
all right. So sometimes they'll ask you, reflect these graphs in about or in the x-axis. Okay, so for the people who were here, right? What would I do if I want to reflect something in the x-axis?
That just times by negative 1, ma'am.
Yes, we're going to, so to reflect these graphs in the x-axis with all of them, you multiply the entire equation by negative 1. Okay, so for this one that we just found, originally your equation was, let me just write it, 1 over 3 to the power of x plus 1. Okay, we have to multiply the entire thing by negative 1. Okay, so that means the new equation is going to be negative 1 over 3 x minus 1. Okay, so another way they could ask it is what would happen to the a and the q value? Okay, so you would just say, okay, the a value becomes negative, the q value becomes negative. Or you would say the a and q values change sign. Okay, so to reflect these graphs in the x-axis, we always multiply the entire equation by negative 1. So it would move from there to there. Okay, what happens to the a and the q? The signs change. Okay, now for the previous one, let's see, what was the equation for this one now? It was y equals, a was also 1. Then you had 3 to the power of x. Okay, plus 0. So what would happen to that one if I reflected it in the x-axis? It would just become
Negative 3 to the power of x.
brilliant, negative 3 to the power of x. Well done. Right. Now, yes.
Does it only apply to exponential?
No, it applies to all of them. So it's going to apply to exponential, hyperbola, straight lines, and parabolas. Okay. So now let's go on to B and D. Okay. I'm going to erase this part now. Oopsie. I want to erase this. Okay. So I want to now find the general equation or the equation of the straight line. Okay. Sometimes people make very trivial mistakes, which you can prevent, right? And it's usually when it comes to working out the, what do you call this? The gradient, okay. So general equation of a straight line is y equals mx plus c. But for this one, they've written it as what? Y equals AX plus Q, but it's literally the same thing, okay? So don't get confused if you're in a test and they give it to you in that form, okay? So first things first, we're gonna need to work out what our gradient is, right? So M equals Y2 minus Y1. The Y's are always at the top, X2 minus X1, right? They've given us they've actually given us 2 points, right? Just that the other point is marked 0, okay? So they've given us this point at the origin, and that is 0, 0. Okay, so I'll call that x1, y1. Then the 3 and -2, x2, y2. Right. Now, let's use these and plug them into your formula. So our gradient, which is also your a, y2 is what? -2 minus 0. Right? Then x2, 3 minus your x1, 0 there. So your gradient for this one is -2/3. That's the gradient. So far, what we have is -2/3x plus q or c. Remember, your c represents what? Or your q. What does your c or your q represent?
The
This is-
asymptote.
Say that again.
The asymptote.
Okay, so be careful for straight lines and parabolas. We don't have asymptotes. Now, the Q here represents the intercept.
Y-intercept.
Right. So C or Q represents the intercept when it's a parabola and a straight line. Okay, so what's the intercept here for the straight line?
0.
Right. So since C or Q is 0, your equation is -2/3x. Right. Reflect this equation in the x-axis. What would the new equation be?
Times -1, ma'am.
Right. So we'd multiply everything by -1. That means if it was negative, it's now going to become
Positive. So 2 -2/0 becomes 2.
brilliant. Okay. So that's the reflection in the x-axis. All right. Awesome. Now on to our parabola. Okay. I just need to erase this bottom part. Okay. Now, with our parabola, bear in mind, again, right? We don't have asymptotes for parabolas, okay? We have the general equation of a parabola, ax² plus q. I think that's what it is, yes. All right, using this, okay? Remember for parabolas and what you call this, straight lines, we said the q represents the
The intercept. Yeah.
right. So what can I plug in by q straight away?
0. No, not 0. -9. Something.
Right. So ax² minus 9. Okay. So you get a mark for writing that -9 there. Okay. Now, next step would be to work out what a is. So what can I do to work out the a value? I'm going to sub the 0.30. Okay. When I do that, okay, so here the x is 3, the y is 0. So 0 equals a 3² minus 9. So now you have 9a minus 9 equals 0. You bring that over, it becomes 9 equals 9a. So what's the a value here? A is
1, ma'am.
equal to 1. Okay. So the equation is now y equals x² minus,
X².
right. If I reflect this in the x-axis, what would it become?
-x² plus 9.
Perfect, okay. Another way they could ask it is what happens to the a and the q values? The values change signs. or you say you multiply them by -1. Okay, up to you, however you decide. So this is the reflection, okay, in the x-axis. Right, so we've dealt with reflections. What if they said, okay?
Sorry, ma'am.
Yes?
Can you please repeat what happens in the A and the Q between Q value?
Okay, so for a reflection in the x-axis, right? The A and Q values, okay, change signs, okay? Then if A was equal to 1, A is now going to be -1. The Q initially was equal to what? -9, but the new Q is now +9. Okay, so this is after it is reflected. Okay, make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so now recap on translations. Okay, translation is a shift up or down, right? If they were to ask you, okay, translate, let me write it out, okay. Translate this graph, okay, let's see, 3 units up. What would the new equation be? You write it in terms of g of
Plus
x.
3.
Okay, so
You
what would
add
happen
3.
is you would just add 3 because it says up, you add. So the new equation would be g of x equals, right? It was x squared minus 9. If you add 3, the new equation is therefore equal to x squared minus
Minus 6.
Right, makes sense? What if they said translated 9 units down? If they had said translated 9 units down. 9
Minus
units,
9, man.
right.
You
So
subtract
9
9.
units, perfect. We're gonna subtract. So let's say they said, write it in terms of kx maybe. So in terms of kx, this would be, if you had initially x squared minus 9, 9 units down, minus 9 again. So the new equation is then x squared minus 18. Okay. That's a translation up or down. You would perform the same translation or operation if it was a straight line, a parabola, hyperbola, or exponential function. Okay, you would just say +3 or plus whatever or minus whatever. Okay, all right. Now, yeah, so I'm gonna go to the next page now. Right. Okay, so let's look at E and H. So we're starting with E here, right? Now, if I look at E, okay, there are certain ways or certain things that they can ask you to do here, right? And there's another way they can actually show you what a hyperbola looks like. This is the normal way you would see a hyperbola, but they can restrict a hyperbola by giving conditions. So if I said this graph, okay, or rewrote it as, or just showed you this point, if it looks like this, there's an asymptote, okay, so you still have the asymptote, y equals 4, right? But this time they only give you that part of the hyperbola, okay? They've done something to this hyperbola. They've restricted it, right? If they only show you one part of a hyperbola, which part of the graph of the hyperbola are they showing if it looks like this new one that I've drawn in red? They've only shown the part that's on the positive side of the x-axis, right? So how could they write this? If they're showing only the positive side of x-axis, it's going to be x is greater than 0, okay? If they were to show only the the left-hand side of the hyperbola, right? Okay, you guys tell me now. If they only showed you this part, okay, how could they write it? X is
X is less than 0.
brilliant. Okay, good. So, like I'm giving you different scenarios, right? They can give you a full hyperbola like that, or they can give it to you in parts. They can give you the part that's on the right side or on the left side. If it's on the left side, it's X is less than 0. If it's on the right-hand side, X is greater than 0. Okay, yeah. So now let us work out the actual equation of this graph. So general equation of a hyperbola, a over x plus q, right? What does the q value represent?
The intercept now. Q represents the asymptote.
The asymptote, right? Okay, so remember, if it's a straight line or a parabola, okay, the q, okay, maybe let me make a note here. If it's a straight line or parabola, q is the intercept. Okay, then if it's an exponential,
I mean, is that any intercept or the y-intercept?
oh, it's always the y. Okay, is the y-intercept. If it's an exponential or hyperbola, then q is the asymptote. Okay, right, let's remember this. Very important, okay? So, since we have a hyperbola, q is your asymptote. So this here is your asymptote. So what would I substitute in the place here, in this place for q? Looking at E.
4, ma'am.
Perfect. Right. Okay. So let's go and plug in the other values. So they've given us one value, right? I can sub in -2 and 0. So my x is -2, my y is 0. So 0 equals a over -2 plus 4. I take the plus 4 over, it becomes negative a over -2. Okay, multiply both sides by -2. So that means my a value is 8. Okay, so the equation is 8 over x plus. Okay. Any questions related to that one? Okay, so let's do h, right? H is also hyperbola, right? So first things first, we know a over x plus q. What's the q value?
Y-intercept. The asymptote, oh my gosh.
Yeah, you're right, it's the asymptote, okay? So the asymptote is, so what do I plug in there? -2, right? Okay. So now that I've plugged in the -2, I'm going to sub the point -2 and 0, okay? So where I see x, I'm plugging in -2. Where I see y, I'm plugging in 0. 0 equals a over -2 minus 2. -2 goes over, it becomes positive, right? And you now have a divided by -2. Multiply both sides by -2. That means my a value is -4. So y equals -4 over x minus 2. All right. Okay. Right, so that one was the other hyperbola. Which one haven't we done? Let me see if there's anything else I haven't covered for you. So let's look at these. Okay, so I want us to look at F and G, right? I'm going to label this point A, and then I'm going to label this one B, right? And then I'll label this one C. So working with those points, right? They could ask you to determine the distance from O to C, if I'm looking at question F, right? Remember, what do we know about distances or lengths? Can lengths or
Yeah,
distance,
negative.
so they can never be negative, right? So where they could ask, they could say determine OC or determine the length. Okay, length of OC. Right. So I know the distance from O to C, or what would the distance from O to C be? Because we've got the intercept, right? So we don't have to work anything out. So from O to C, what's that distance?
2.
2 units, okay? And then what would the distance from O to A be for G?
Oh, that would be 2.
Right, it will also be 2 units. Then the distance from O to B, what would that be? Also,
2 units.
right, okay? Now, if you know what B is here, okay? Tell me, what do you think this point over here would be? So that's
Negative 2,
Negative 2
man.
and
Negative
0.
2 and 0.
brilliant. So the D there would be negative 2 and 0. Let's say they gave you
And
this.
would we have to show working out for that? For
No, you
D?
don't have to show working out because it's symmetrical. So you don't have to show working out. Now, okay, let's say they have 2 points like I've added here on G. If this point is 3 and negative 6, what do you think the corresponding point on the other side is going to be?
Negative 3 and
Negative 3
negative
and
6.
6.
Brilliant. Okay. All right. I'm just checking if there's anything we haven't gone through. I think we've gone through most of everything. Yeah, done everything. We've done translations. It's shifting up or down. Okay. Let me do a quick recap quickly. So if you're given y equals 2x plus 4, then they tell you that there's now a new graph, 2x plus 10. What is the translation that moves y to g? What's the translation that moves y to g?
It moved up by 6 units, man.
Right. So your answer would be translate y 6 units up. Okay, this was recap. I think we did this on Monday. Okay, then what's the axis of symmetry for a parabola? So axis of symmetry, okay, you're going to have 2 of them. You have one for a parabola. Okay, so in grade 10, the axis of symmetry for the parabola is always going to be, if you were here, tell me guys, what was it? Okay, people have forgotten. X equals 0. That's the axis of symmetry for a parabola, okay? Then for a hyperbola, if you weren't here, okay, or if you don't remember for a hyperbola, right? This is the general equation. Now the axis of symmetry for hyperbolas, you have 2, okay? The way we figure it out is you look at the denominator plus the Q value. That gives you the first axis of symmetry. So the first one is y equals x
Y
plus
equals X plus Q.
Q.
And
Right.
then would the second one be Y is equal to minus X plus Q now?
Brilliant. Well done. Okay, so that's axis of symmetry for hyperbolas and parabolas. Okay, this is all recap from Monday. Okay, we've done translations, reflections, we've done I showed you how to restrict a hyperbola. I've shown you lengths from the origin, okay? We've learned how to find the equation. Is there anything else? No, I think that's all, guys. That's all we need to do for now. Yeah, so do you guys have any questions before we leave?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
ma'am, what's an asymptote? Like, what is it? What is it?
Okay, so now asymptotes are points that your graph will never cut, right? So you're only going to have asymptotes for an exponential graph, right? And you're going to have an asymptote for your hyperbola. Good question, okay? Now, if you're told that you have a multiplied by k to the power of x plus q, the asymptote for the exponential graph is y equals q, okay? Right, so if they gave you 3 times 2 to the power of x minus 4, what's the asymptote for this graph? The one that I just wrote for, and this is an exponential.
-4.
Okay, so you have to write it as an equation. So it's going to be y equals -4, right? For a hyperbola, you have 2 asymptotes. So if you have a over x plus q, you have the first one, which is the denominator. X can never
X
be
equals
equal to
0.
right. Then y equals q, right? We're about to run out of time. 2 over x plus 7. Asymptote, x equals 0, and the y1, y equals 7. Okay, we're about to run out. All the best for tomorrow, guys.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
All
ma'am.
right. If you have
Bye.
any questions,
ma'am.
send an email, okay? If you're stuck on
Yes,
anything,
ma'am.
send me an email and I'll
Yes,
respond.
ma'am.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Do the rest of your day, ma'am.
You're gonna ace the test tomorrow, okay?
Yes, we are,
Thank
ma'am.
you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
All right.
Hopefully.
Yeah, you will. You have to have
Okay.
confidence.